The effects of colonization and the price some leaders paid for independence to the French is something Africans will not stop talking about. In the 1950s and 60s, France decided that French colonies of Africa will become independent. Although the Paris government accepted former declarations of independence, it called on African countries to sign a so-called pact for the continuation of colonization. France has therefore accepted an independence on paper for its colonies, but has signed in parallel cooperation agreements specifying the nature of their relations with France, especially the ties to the currency, the franc, the French education system, military agreements, and trade preferences. While the former U.S. Secretary Rex Tillerson was in Africa, he warned Africans to be careful with China that is receiving aid and loans for them. Today on the Pan-African debate, we wonder why is it that after over half a century, some countries in Africa are not really independent. Why are some African countries still suffering from the fact that they were colonized? In other words, it is the rebirth of the scramble for Africa in the 21st century, and that is a post-colonial reality. Hello to you all, and thanks for joining us on the program today. We apologize for the late start. It is the Pan-African debate on African Media, your #1 Pan-African television channel. Today we are looking at what so many call La France Afrique, which was born after the colonial masters left. When we talk about colonial masters today, we mean actually France, and as all of you all know, about 14 African countries are still paying for being colonized so many years ago. Before we get into the debate proper, I would like us to first of all have a review of the press, what has been making news in the papers this week. And we have with us here in the studio able Clarice Widoven, who is going to brief us on what has been making news in the papers this week. Hello to you, Clarice, and thanks for joining us here.
The pleasure is mine, Regina Sondu. Ladies and gentlemen, it is always said information is knowledge, and that's why I bring to you today's edition of Press Today Roundup. Only on your Pan-African television, we'll visit our first paper, which is Sudan Tribune, and it is talking about the extension of the United Nations mission in South Sudan. Now, the paper uncovered that the United Nations Security Council that was on Thursday renewed the mandate of the UN peacekeeping mission in South Sudan for another year and demanded that all parties involved in its ongoing conflict immediately end the fighting with the unanimous adoption of a resolution on the mandate extension until March 15, 2019, charged with performing tasks like protecting civilians, creating the conditions conducive to the delivery of humanitarian assistance, monitoring and investigating human rights violations, and supporting the peace process. Now, Uganda's leading online journal, that is Daily Monitor, narrated that Israel's Supreme Court on Thursday suspended a controversial government plan to deport thousands of Eritrean and Sudanese migrants in response to a challenge from those opposed to the move. The court said in its decision that the state was given until March 26 this year to provide further information, and the suspension on deporting them to a third country will remain in place until then. Let's visit the southern African nation of Zimbabwe. The Herald newspaper, Zimbabwe's leading online journal, noted that President Mnangagwa urged the media to take a leading role in disseminating information to the world that Zimbabwe is in a new era and open for business. Speaking at the 5th CEO Africa Roundtable Conference ongoing in Zimbabwe, the president said the media should continuously share Zimbabwe's vision and aspirations with the rest of the world. Daily Post, Nigeria's online publication, recounted that Nobel laureate Wole Soyinka has revealed that former President Goodluck Jonathan dismissed him when he inquired about the kidnap of over 200 schoolgirls in Chibok, Borno State. The famous author and playwright said Jonathan told him that he should take the abduction of the schoolgirls as his own problem and deal with it his own way. He was speaking Thursday at a dialogue organized by Ripple Center for Data and Investigative Journalism in Lagos. Liberia's online journal, which is Daily Observer, the new report that the United Nations Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohamed on Tuesday announced that the United Nations Peace Building Fund is ready to expand its support to Liberia as the country transitions from peacekeeping to peace building. Speaking Tuesday at an informal meeting of Liberia's peace-building configuration in New York, DSG Mohammed said the Peace-Building Fund has been a committed partner to Liberia, lending a support of $10 million in 2017 and is ready to expand its support. Jihara said much more is needed from development partners to realize Liberia's ambitions. Proceeding to Rwanda, Rwanda's leading daily, the New Times, reviewed why and how President Paul Kagame on Thursday challenged African broadcasters to be more proactive in telling African stories and undo the current status quo whereby the continent's stories are often told by outsiders. Kagame was speaking during an interaction with delegates at the African Union of Broadcasting General Assembly in Kigali. Now, Friday's publication of Daily Nation Kenya uncovered why then Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe described his departure from office in November as a coup d'etat that we must undo in court. In his first TV interview since then aired on Thursday, I say it was a coup d'etat. Some people have refused to call it a coup d'etat. End of quote. Mugabe said this, referring to the brief army takeover which led to Emerson Mnangagwa assuming power after his resignation. The national newspaper Daily News of Tanzania noted that how former Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe described his departure from office in November as a coup d'etat that we must undo in court. In his first TV interview since then, it was aired on Thursday on the South African national TV SABC. The same journal also on effort while President John Magufuli said taxation must not be burdensome. Now let's proceed to Namibia, and according to New Era, the journal reported that Minister of Finance Carles Kleshtwana says the government wants to cut the ballooning public servant wage bill by only fulfilling essential posts. Kleshtwana was responding to questions raised during his post-budget consultations in Walvis Bay regarding the delay in appointment that remains a challenge for some ministries. And finally, Egypt independent newspaper recounted that the countdown for Egyptian experts voting in the 2018 presidential elections has begun as the voting process kicked off on Friday, March 16 and will last until Sunday, the 18th of March this year. Egyptians in 124 countries will be able to vote in a total of 139 polling stations. The voting meeting will take place at the consulate's headquarters along with several diplomatic missions set by the National Electoral Commissioner. And that's how we saw it on Press Today Roundup. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for always being there. And I will leave you, of course, with Gina Sondo as you keep on enjoying the debate program, the Pan-African debates.
Thank you so very much, Clarice Reedover, and thanks for telling us what has been making news in the press this week. Fellow viewers, if you are just joining us, it is the Pan-African debate on Afrique Media TV, and today we discuss La France, Afrique, and the post-colonial reality. Emanuela Nyoki, our very own journalist here in Afrique Media, did us a paper on the whole scramble for Africa and what other countries are still coming to Africa to gain. I would like you to take a listen to this, and I'll join you right after that.
The scramble for Africa still continues in the 21st century, birthed in the form of neocolonialism. Africa was mostly colonized by British, French, Portugal during the scramble for Africa, and after a prolonged stay in the continent, the colonized nation adopted the colonizers' language as official languages in their countries. Hence, more than 20 French-speaking African countries exist, and most of these countries still pay colonial taxes to French up to date. After French colonialism ended in the 1950s and 60s, French widened a tight grip over its former dominions, using military might to install leaders in return for French companies securing lucrative contracts. A policy duped France-Afrique, but French diplomats claimed the days of French throwing its weight around commercial favors are over. France shifts away from France-Afrique has enrolled the privilege once enjoyed by companies such as Total, Orange, and others, just as globalization has opened the field to India and China in particular. Barely 6 months into office, President Emmanuel Macron of France made his third visit to the sub-Saharan Africa. Yet, while the energetic young leader is eager to reshape France's relationship with the continent, all problems die hard. His November 28 to 30th trip to Burkina Faso, Ghana, and Ivory Coast was aimed at boosting cooperation on education, digital economy, and environment. Emmanuel Macron's visit to Africa has been tainted not only by attacks and protests on his stop in Burkina Faso. Macron probably humiliated Burkina Faso's president as French leaders' Africa's trip goes wrong. The president of the African nation apparently wasn't so much into French humor either, leaving the room during Macron's speech as he spoke in a local university. Apart from his visit, French troops are in most parts of French Africa, with more than 70,000 French troops deployed across the continent with the claims of fighting jihadists. French presidents usually make early visits to Africa, but some have misjudged. Nicolas Sarkozy declared the tragedy of Africa is that the Africans have not fully entered into history. The comment haunted him and caused most criticism. Macron's proposal to bluster Africa's growth and create jobs echoed Germany's call for a Marshall Plan for Africa. Moreover, France is not the only country struggling to have an imperialism on Africa. The United States, through his Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, made his first trip to Africa, which turned out to be his final one. President Donald Trump was initially reported to have asked Tillerson to step aside sometime last Friday, March 9, after his arrival in Kenya from Djibouti. On the 1st of March, the Department of State had announced that Tillerson will visit 5 countries in Africa: Chad, Djibouti, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Nigeria, from March 6 to the 13th to discuss counter-terrorism, trade, investment, amongst other things. Tillerson capriciously cancelled his scheduled event in Kenya on Saturday, March 10, with officials saying that he was not feeling well. Meeting in Chad and Nigeria, Tillerson cut his Africa trip short a day earlier before he went back to Washington. While it was meant as a trip to advance the United States' interests, Tillerson's trip was somewhat dominated by China and China's ascendant role in Africa. On the eve of the trip, Tillerson criticized China's model of economic development in Africa, claiming it endangered Africa's natural resources and its long-term economic political stability. When he reached Ethiopia, he also warned African nations against forfeiting their sovereignty and suggesting that they should carefully consider the terms of their agreement with China. While in Chad, Tillerson said the United States is considering lifting the travel ban on the country, given improvements made in the travel security. With all the aid claimed and development promises from France, China, Germany, United States of America, Africa is still underdeveloped and not independent. The question is, why are they still crumbling for the African continent till date?
Thank you very much, Emanuela Nyoke. That is the question every African or most Africans have on their lips. Why is there still a scramble in the 21st century? Now, Ghana, which was the first African country that gained independence some 61 years ago, just recently celebrated 61 years, and many people have been praising the Ghanaian president Nana Akufo-Addo for his stance. He has said he is looking at a Ghana beyond aid, a Ghana that is all independence, and we all hope that one day every African country is going to say that. Now, I'll just like us to come back to us here in the panel, in the studio. While waiting for the others, we have Mr. Carl. He is a politician, and he is joining us here in the studio, Mr. Tabonkal. Thank you so much for making time out of your busy schedule to be here with us.
Thank you very much, Gina. Thank you very much for inviting me here.
Now, you heard from the report and from what so many Africans have been saying. Are you going to call it the scramble of Africa or the scramble for Africa in the 21st century?
Gina, I am going to call it the scramble for Africa in the 21st century because Africa is a continent which God decided to bless with all the resources. All the resources, the main resources are found in Africa. That is why most European countries like France, Germany, Belgium, Germany, to an extent the United States of America, they are scrambling for territories in Africa. They are really scrambling for territories in Africa because they know what they want. For example, materials like, some resources like wood, petrol, gold, manganese, to name just a few. So they all know that they can't do without Africa. That is why one French president, I think François Mitterrand, said, Africa cannot do without France, and France cannot do without Africa. But Africa can do with France, but France cannot do without Africa, in my own opinion. So we were all taught in school that the scramble means a mad rush for rich territory, not a mad rush for poor territories. Poor territories, of course. Africa is a very rich continent. Everywhere in Africa, especially Cameroon, we find everything. They are very rich territories. So
the scramble for Africa still continues in the 21st century.
Europeans can't, for the sake of life, allow Africa to go like that. No. It therefore means that they want to really see into it that Africa is under their control. And if Africa is not under their control, they are not happy seeing Africa especially given their resources elsewhere. Like, for instance, look at what is happening today. China is now involved in Africa. When Europeans were like sharing the world, Africa was out of that. They never put Africa, never put China. Now China has decided to come in. That is why you see them, especially the United States of America.
Mr. Tabonkal, you just mentioned something that other powers were not really into the scramble of Africa. They're just coming in now, but I think in those days, some of these countries, such as India, that is coming into Africa, and even China, those countries that are coming in to sign corporations with the African continent, are probably richer than us. So how do you explain this? Why is it that up to now, we are not the ones with all of our resources getting out there to sign pacts with or agreements with other countries, but then other countries still coming to us? What is happening to Africa?
Gina, the truth is that when you have a rich territory like Africa, you always see people coming into Africa. You know, the Europeans You can fool the people some of the time, but you will never fool the people all the time. They have been deceiving us. Now that some people has come to open our eyes like China, that is why you see countries like France, the United States of America coming back to Africa to remind us that, listen, the treaty you're signing with this particular country, they are like colonizing you again, of which they've been doing that long. Just because our eyes are now open, and they do not wonder our eyes should be open. Let them come. If they want to really continue with us in Africa, they should sign it. We should put ourselves together and discuss on how we'll give them our raw material and what they're going to give back to us, not like using force. That is it. And that's the reason why you see most of the European nations, they are not happy seeing other nations coming to Africa to collect, maybe to buy resources from us. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carl. Now, just to tell all of you that our panel is here already. Mr. Mutaga Sivanus is joining us here in the studio. Thanks a lot. You traveled a very long way to be here today. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Mutaga.
Thank you, Gina, and thanks to all the televiewers of Africa Media TV. It's pretty regrettable that I came late, but then it's better late than never. So we want to greet those who are watching us, especially Professor James Bagma, who is watching us right now in the University of Boya, and also to congratulate him for his book launch that is coming up in April 2018, Gina. And looking at the topic of today, why is there still a scramble for Africa in the 21st century? I want to say Africa has been a gold mine, and it has been a very lucrative arena for these Western countries since the time of the scramble, which was long over since the 17th and the 18th centuries. If you look at what Rex Tillerson of the United States of America just came and said about China and warning most of the African countries not to collaborate with China, I want to say it's commonly said the better you are in front of a man, that is the worse he looks at you. That is exactly how it is. Whatsoever people don't know, they try to criticize, and whatever they know, they want to destroy it. Many people know today that China is a good trading partner, and they want to do everything possible to criticize China. They want to do everything possible to destroy China's relationship with most countries, because we know that China is not that kind of a country that comes to a business deal because they want to exploit you. They have always come with very clear ambitions. It's a win-win issue. So today, Africa is already a continent that has come up of age, and they know that like this, it's better for them to renegotiate their trading deals with most of these countries. And most of the countries, especially France, you have the United States of America, you have Britain, and you name the rest that have been benefiting from Africa. They see that they don't want to renegotiate those trading deals, especially because they know that if those trading deals have to be renegotiated, they will have to lose a lot. And if China is coming in, and China is not coming in because he wants to rival with these countries. China is coming in because China wants to have its own share of the cake. You know, Africa is a very vast market, and Africa is still more of an unexploited ground. You know, most of our experts, those who are very, very educated, that ought to be absorbed in Africa, they are going out. You know, instead of being absorbed by our systems in place, we have bad government, we have poor government policies, we have economic policies that are not good, that do not encourage research. And even if there are researchers, remember one time when Sheikh Mohammed said of young guys who discovered they discovered a satellite program there in the West. It was not considered. It was only when the Belgian company or some Belgian experts had to call them up and appreciate it before the Cameroon government started looking at them. So what is it is China is coming in, Gina, to treat with Africa in a very fair way, and the United States of America, seeing that its interest in Africa is already being tampered with through the presence of China, will do everything possible to play the good guy policy by telling us that be careful with China. You know, it's better to treat with a demon you know than to treat with an angel you don't know, because many of us are looking at China as an angel. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you so much, Sir Mutaga. And we have Mr. Edmond Kiate with us here in the studio. he was here before and he spoke about this whole issue, the post-colonial era with La France Afrique. Mr. Admiral Kuyate, thank you so much for making time out of your busy, very busy schedule to be here with us. Now, will you call it the scramble for Africa in the 21st century?
Hello, Gina. Hello to my co-panelist, and hello to all your televiewers. I'm sorry, like you said, I got a very busy schedule, but I'm sorry I came late. I should have been here before, but I make a way to be here. I'm here. Talking about the topic of today, whenever we are talking about Africa, I want us to dissociate French-speaking countries with other countries in Africa. They are not the same. We cannot combine all these countries and put them in the same basket and treat them the same way. No, it can never be the same. Just a couple of days ago, you saw the decision that the president of Ghana made. He took a very serious decision. He said, yes, he said, I'm not going in for IMF funds. I don't want it. And he said the growth of our economy is sustainable enough to allow us, structuring our economy from a new point. He said we got all the potentials that can enable us to restructure our economy and help everything to pick up in a new system. But just a couple of months before, you saw what happened in Yaoundé when all these presidents gathered with the Director General of IMF and the Minister of Economy of France. You saw the decision they took, and you saw how our countries are going today. Just a couple of days ago, they had to cancel a competition in Cameroon because there is no money. There is a big difference. If you go into this France-Afrique stuff you're talking about, do you know that, Gina, there are some countries here in Africa, here in the French-speaking area, there are some countries, they have some agreement, they call it cooperation agreement with France that was signed before the independence. And these agreements are still valid till today. Most of these countries, like Ivory Coast, like Centrafrique, like Togo, most of these countries, it is clearly stated that below 20 meters of the soil is the country, the whole country is the property of France. Below 20 meters, that is when you dig below 20 meters is no longer your property. And we all know that even to get real cool, good water, potable water, you need to go below 20 meters. At least it is 70 meters. But when you have such agreement, when you sign such agreements, they say below 20 meters, you need to get the authorization from France to go below 20 meters because it is the property of France. And this agreement are still valid till date. What do you expect from this country? What can you get from this country? And you get the same agreement, what they call defense agreement, that allow France to have their military base all over the countries. You got in Chad, you got in Gabon, you got in Djibouti, you got all these military base of France all over. How can you be free in your country with somebody having his military, his army all around? And the agreement, the defense agreement stated that even the president of the country, he cannot have a look into this military base to see what is going. He cannot question what is going on there. These are the agreements most of the country are still having nowadays. How do you think? What do you expect from such country? When we are talking, some people think we are just shouting. Most of these countries apparently are independent countries, but really they are not independent countries. The only difference they have made today is that you will no longer see white men in the street making some decision, but you will see our black brothers that has been brainwashed to behave exactly as the colonial, even worse than the colonial master, and treating their own brothers just like slaves. That is what is happening in our countries. In this regard, I don't think there is any perspective of development. There is no way most of this country can develop, not even talk of democracy, because France decide in most of this country who is going to be president. You call them president, but they are simple commercial and industrial representatives of France. They are appointed, I'm not saying elected, they are appointed by France for some special and particular mission, that is to preserve and to defend the interests of France whensoever and wheresoever need may be. That is what is going on in this country. So I want us to dissociate. When we are talking of Africa, let's not give the impression that Africa is a single country where things are the same all over. No. We had the same, Nigeria a couple of months ago had the same problem like Central Africa. But you see today, they are really picking up again. Because they have this, they can, they have the possibility to, they have a lot of flexibility in the way they want to structure their economy. We are not saying that there are some countries without having any problem. No, there are problems all over. But when you have problem with the interference of foreign countries, of people you don't even know, you don't even see, it is difficult for you to look for proper solutions, to these problems. That is what we are saying, and that's why we're thinking that it is important to dissociate French-speaking country from other countries in Africa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mkuyate. Now, Mr. Carl, do you agree with what he is saying? Because he's not the first person, many Africans say it, that it is usually France-Afrique that has a problem in Africa. When you look at other countries that probably the British, as Emanuela Nyoki was talking about, she said Africa was not colonized by one country. You had the British, you had the Portuguese, you had the Belgians and France. But then why is it that up to date we still have so many French African countries still backward? It is 60 or even 50 something years. Why are they still backward? So the question is, were our leaders in those days forced to sign these lucrative agreements, lucrative for the French? Were they forced to sign these pacts or these agreements? Pact is a big word.
Gina, I will completely agree with what Kuyate said, because when you take the fact that France, when French entered Africa and British entered Africa, they had two different policies, which French implemented a policy of assimilation, therefore means they wanted Africans to be like black French men, while British used a policy of indirect rule. That is the reason why British allow its colony to rule their subject themselves. Therefore, France never wanted that. France wanted to rule the people directly. That is why they went to an extent introduced the policy of indigena. Went to an extent introduced certain policies which were not even good for the ears to hear. Now, that's the reason why France considered African territories, their territories in Africa as France overseas. That is the very big problem. And France, knowing fully that he's a sick man or Euro without anything, he knows that his territories in Africa, no one should tamper with. That is why people like Gbagbo paid the price. People like Gaddafi paid the price. Now, when it comes to British, we are not saying that they are completely free. They are still, the economic part. The worst thing of France, this issue of France-Afrique, the worst thing of France has deliberately refused to give political, economic, and financial independence. But why British has given, let's say, political independence, but not economical independence, and they gave to an extent financial independence to the various colonies. The day French colony will reach the level of British colony, it will be the day they will cease from using the franc CFA. They should go in for their own currency. If they go in for their own currency, they will succeed in developing their country. Look at what happened in Ghana with Nana Akufo-Addo. He said clearly that Ghana is an independent territory. And Britain has not said anything up to today. But just venture tomorrow, if Mr. Abia says Cameroon is an independent territory, the next day he's leaving that particular Etudi. The next day he's leaving Etudi. Because that is the reason why you find in Africa that most African territories, most British colonized African territories are more developed than French colonized African territories. Let us take the case of Congo Democratic. There is another devil in the name of the devil incarnated in the name of Belgium. Look at what happened. That was 2 weeks ago. We discussed that here. Congo has never known peace. Congo has never known peace because Belgium has decided not to Congo, not to allow Congo to turn their independence because of Katanga. That particular soil is too rich. Look at what happened in Central African Republic. My dear, you cry. Why they are killing Africans? Our resources, in the name of the UN protecting people, that is how the resources were flying. They were flying from Central Africa to France. Now, when Macron happened to visit one country in Africa, I don't know it's Burkina Faso, if I'm my good memory, one student got up and said, people are saying that there is a base in Paris where all our gold, all our resources, the gold they collect in Africa, they are kept there in Paris. Macron said, you people should come and show me. But which is very, very bad. I am telling you, Gina, France, Africa, if our African leaders are serious, especially French African leaders, if they are serious, first of all, they should stay away from France, Africa. Look, we also have the Commonwealth, but the way France, Africa is dealing with the French territory is not good for the ears to hear. You know.
Okay, thank you very much. So, I'm coming to you now, Sam Taga. Why are these countries dictating to us? I mean, especially France. Is the African continent baby? Are we babies after 50 years, you're already a man. But then why do we still have people dictating to us what to do? Like Rex Tillerson coming to Africa and saying, be careful with China. China is dangerous for Africa, and probably other countries have said the same thing. Like France, probably they would obviously warn us with the type of countries to deal with. Aren't we old enough to decide the type of things we want to do, the type of people we want to deal with?
Gina, one time I said here that we Africans need to take our destinies into our hands. We don't need to rely anymore on our leaders. Because if we rely on these colonial leaders, they will still work for the interests of their colonial masters. So to think that these guys who are our masters or our leaders will have to liberate us from colonial influences is not true. That is exactly why I said last 2 weeks that I was here on this particular platform that a U.S. Democrat, that is a senator, said the reason why guns are sold in the United States to every Dick and Storm or any kind of a man is because those guns have to be used against the system in place anytime that they find that the system is violating the rights of the common man. So if we think that the systems in place that were put in place by our colonial masters will work for our good as a common people, then we have failed. In all the African territories, all the African countries, they should be thinking of a revolution. And this revolution will not come when we are naive. We have to stand up and fight for our destinies. It is high time somebody told those who have been waiting and looking at those who are fighting for a change as if they are those who want to destroy a country or those who want to destabilize the country, to understand that like this. Since from the time of John the Baptist, I have always said, the kingdom of God suffered violence, and only the violent take it by force. If we Africans want our freedom, want to manage our resources, we should stand to our feet and tell the white man, tell France that it is time for you to leave. We should not wait for a system. I want to be very frank. Let me not say I'm standing on the side of these leaders who were put in place by the colonial masters. They too want freedom for their people. But their fear is, if they stand for freedom and work, will the people support them? It is time for us to stand and hit our hands on the table and say, no, we want France to live, we want these people to live. And then you see these leaders will start acting.
Yeah. Samutaga, let me just cut you in a bit. Your question is, will the people support them? But then, as we have been hearing from other reports, they're actually people from West Africa. I'm talking about Senegal and some other French-speaking countries who took to the streets and said they do no longer want the French in their country. They don't want that currency, France, Afrique, because to them it was danger. So don't you think these leaders already have support enough? Some of these countries already have support enough for their leaders just to snap their fingers and things start happening.
Gina, let me borrow the words of Martin Luther Jr., especially when he was at the Alabama City jail. He said, freedom is never given by the oppressed, by the oppressor to the oppressed freely. For over 300 years, the Americans used to hear, the black Americans used to hear the issue that wait, that they need authorization for this and all the like. What I want to say is, gold will, we don't expect freedom to come on platter of gold. By moving into the street and the protesting is not enough. I want to say it has to do with a certain degree of pressure on the system in place. Because if we still continue thinking that we just need to go out in the street and march and tell the French government that no, we don't need your presence in Africa, it is not true. I am not instigating violence. There are institutions. If we go march freely in the street and tell them we need you, want you to renegotiate your contract, we want you to leave our state free, and they are not reacting. They have their investments in Africa. They have other things in Africa. We need to begin to target them. Talk to those persons who are ruling those people, that we pressurize them through those channels and tell them we don't want you. We shouldn't be naive. We shouldn't be naive. It is high time we Africans start behaving as people who are mature to understand that when you look in Africa, I witnessed the coronation of my king one time. When they gave him the baton of command, the staff of command, he did not only collect it, he has to seize it. So it shows that freedom, authority is not just given, you have to seize it. So if we think that France will just tell us that, no, I have loved you free, go ahead and manage your resources, it is not true. France will need a lot of pressure. Remember, when you read the Vietnam War of Independence, you find how the Vietnamese struggle so hard for their independence. This French itself colonized Vietnam on the motives of what they talk of mission civilisatrice, that they were going to civilize, they wanted to civilize the Vietnamese. America was silent. America was quite silent simply because America saw that a strong Western Europe was going to be of advantage to America. So America, as you see, America will only help to advise, but anything that will have to threaten its diplomatic partners, America will want to shy behind. It is left on these people to show that they are quite determined to have their freedom. If they are quite determined, I think there is nothing more rewarding than one's determination and working hard for it. So we need to work for our independence. We are not quite free. Yes, Metalcar just said we are not free financially. We are not free economically. We need to cut ourselves from the franc CFA, dependent on the franc CFA, and create a new money. If we see create a new money, and this money, you know, for money to have international recognition, it has to do with certain diplomatic principles and all the like. These countries have to first of all see that we are quite mature enough. When I look at the last president of Zimbabwe, the guy who resigned, Robert Mugabe, at a certain time there was an economic embargo that was given to him. Mugabe proved that he could live. If you look at Gaddafi also proved that he was strong enough to live. Just that we were naive and most Africans did not go behind to support them. But if we prove that we are quite mature enough to handle our destinies, and that even if an embargo is slammed on us, we can depend on ourselves, you find that we will begin to gain respect from these countries, because these countries are behaving because they think that without them we cannot survive. It is high time we encourage domestic investment. It's high time we encourage research, scientific innovations in our own country, and cut links with the importation of Western ruled machineries and other like. If those machineries can be manufactured in Africa, machines and other like, I don't think the West will have enough reason to begin to minimize us. The France and other like will have anything to do. But don't forget that France alone is not the country that will have to dominate Africa without it working in collaboration with other European countries. Remember, France has a good relationship with European members. So if we think that like this, if we have to cut links with France, it is for us to cut links with France and then maybe work with Spain or maybe work with this and other like we have failed. It's time for Africa to remain unique, has its identity, try to see how it can live as a free continent by developing its philosophy, developing its own politics, like Czech said one time here, before colonization, when things had to be handled, the king did not have to take decisions on his own. He has to consult his subjects. So we need to really completely revise all the education that we receive from the West and try to form an education that is of the African origin and that will promote African values and all the like. And then when we will install our money, I think that money will have to be accepted by the African man, because we have already we begin to believe in our own capabilities and abilities, Gina.
Thank you so much, Semuchaga. Now, Mr. Monfiate, what Semuchaga is saying is Africans have made it clear to the West, especially France, we do not want you. And that was the message so many Burkinabés had when Emmanuel Macron visited West Africa some months ago. Now, Emmanuel Macron, just unlike the other former leaders of France, is a president who was born after independence, as he said. He said he was born after independence, and some people say probably things are going to be different. Now, do you think it is going to be a different ride with this new French president who was born after independence?
Gina, let me ask you a question. Were you there when your forefather bought your land in the village? Were you present? Is that the reason why if someone comes today and claim that land, you will give it to him just because, I weren't when my forefather bought this land, or they bought it, or they seized it, whatever they did to possess the land. I was not there. So is that enough reason why you just give it to someone like that? Let's not be naive. Emmanuel Macron knows where the incomes of France is coming from. He knows it. And he knows that if they cut this link between France and Africa, they will be starved. All French people are going to be starved. So let's forget about all these speculations. This man is not from, this man is from. What is the meaning of that? What matters is, to him, Macron, what matters is, how do I proceed for France to be a powerful nation again and again? If that goes through the killing of all Africans, let it be. If this must pass through, if the happiness of all French people must pass through the misery of all Africans, let it be. It has always been like that. So don't think it is because he's a new generation, but he's a new generation. Before becoming a president, he knew why he wanted to become president. It's not after being president that he will say, oh, what do I do next? He knew before he became president, he knew what is going on, how France is managing to have incomes from Africa. He knows it perfectly, more than you. So let's not be naive. I think it is time for Africans. I'm talking of French-speaking Africans, and then I will repeat myself. It need be thousands of times. We are talking about French-speaking Africans because you have 14 countries. What the hell? You have 14 countries using a currency called CFA. This CFA francs, how is it structured? It means we are not the owner of our currency. That is not enough. That is not enough. But it means whatever we sell from Africa, whatever we sell, our mineral resources, woods, whatsoever, mines, and so on, the money has to pass through the Treasury of France in what they call operational account. That's how they call it. And they pay it there. They keep all the money there. And then they manufacture what they call CFA, which is papers only. It's not quite different from what you use in your toilet or whatsoever. Because this CFA, this currency, if you take it out of your country, it means nothing. Don't, if you are planning to travel to China or whatsoever in the world, don't take it, except you are moving in the same zone, these 6 countries. If you are even taking it to West Africa, where they are also using CFA, it means nothing. It becomes nothing. And then they manufacture it and they give it, if they have received 1,000 francs, they will give you 500 francs. And 500 will remain at their own properties. Because they are, it's like a debt, colonial debt. We are still paying. We've been paying this debt for long. How can we develop ourselves? If we sell our wood at $10, we will only receive the equivalent of $5 in CFA franc. This CFA franc, you cannot use it to buy equipment, medical equipment, schools, whatsoever. You cannot use it to buy it. No. What they have succeeded, I mean, it is terrible. It is horrible what is going on. Sometimes when we are talking, some people think we are just shouting for no good reason. No, it is very terrible. It is horrible. Can you imagine if you sell something to China, to Taiwan, to US, wheresoever, to India, there is no possibility of direct transaction between this special country and you here in French-speaking Africa, because they will have to pay. If they have to pay you in dollars, it is not possible. They have to pay you in euro, it is not feasible. They have to pay through France, and then France will manufacture this currency and give it to you.
Now, Mr. Monkiate, talking about going through France to get particular things, I do not know if you are aware of the fact that for a very long time, Cameroonians, especially, CEMAC countries have not been able to have passports easily, because everything is being manufactured in France, and before the passport booklets get produced, before we have our ID cards, it takes a very long time, because we have to rush to our colonial masters to provide these things. Now, will you classify this under one of the things that most African countries are still depending on from France? I mean, those African countries that were colonized by France.
It is worse than that. It is worse than that. It is not only that. Today, we depend our local, our domestic consumptions, food, 80% is imported. And all this has to pass through France. If you want to buy rice, if you want to buy oil, or what we import for all this has to be approved by France. Because your bank, what you do not know, if you want to buy rice for instance, or oil from Taiwan or whatsoever, your bank cannot send a direct maybe letter of credit from your bank to your supplier in Taiwan. No, it has to be approved somewhere in France before this transaction is doable. We are not independent, and that's why things will become tougher and tougher in our country. You are talking about a booklet for the passport, IDs. Sometimes you go to the police stations, you register for an ID. It will take 6 months for you to receive the ID. It will take 8 months, sometimes 1 year. Some people are even discouraged and they even abandon their IDs there, because all the produce, everything must come from France. If they do not send it, then we are dead. it is very bad. It is time for us to think about how to get away from this terrible and horrible situation. We cannot cope. And that is one of the reasons why our country is today divided. If we don't react fast, things will get worse. Why? Because our English brothers are thinking that this way we are depending 95% on France is very bad. And you know, it comes from our history and from our culture. They were not used to it. They were used to another system where they knew that, okay, with the British colony, as a British colony, we were indirectly ruled, so we had our freedom to manage one or two things. We are not assimilated. So today they find themselves assimilated by France, and they say, no, we're tired of with that. So what I think is that we have to think, we Africans, we have to decide if you want to be free. And if we have to be free, like I've always said, freedom can never be a gift that the oppressor will tell the oppressed, oh, I'm tired of oppressing you. Well, now you can go your way. No, it will never, ever happen. You have to stand up and fight for your freedom. You have to stand up and fight for your dignity. If you go through the history of all nations, Western nation, US, Russia, China, everybody fought for his freedom and for his dignity. There is no nation who has received as a gift liberty from his oppressor. It has never existed. But we in Africa, we think it is possible. It is a lie. It can never be possible. We have to stand up. We have to fight for our freedom. We are not free. Sometimes we will say we are relying on our leaders. Which leaders? What do you call leader in French-speaking Africa? It doesn't exist. We go as far as calling them presidents. What type of president are you talking about? You saw what happened in Ivory Coast. People elected their president, but France said no, we do not want that man. They did everything politically, they failed. They said, okay, now we are coming with the army, and they came with the army and they bombed the presidency of Ivory Coast. They took Mr. Gbagbo and they sent him, they deported him, and they put their man
now facing charges with
exactly.
ISIS.
Now they put their man in charge. So how do you think? How long are we going to stand this? How long are this going to be? How long are we going to stand it? It is time for us to say no. And the only way to say no is not by sitting and crying and screaming and shouting day in, day out, year in, year out. We have to stand up and fight collectively. Everybody have to be concerned. This is a collective concern. It is not Mr. Edmond and Mr. Maitre and the other. No, it is not the problem of the panelists of Afrique Media. It is the problem of all Africans. We have to stand up and stand this France. We have to to send them out.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Edmond Kiate. If you're just joining us, it is the Pan-African debate on Afrique Media, your #1 Pan-African channel. Today, we are looking at the post-colonial reality, and our case study is La France Afrique. You can join us using any of the numbers that are on the screen. You could ask a question to any of the panelists here in the studio. You could as well send me a message on my Facebook page, Gina Sondo on Afrique Media TV. I would read the question you have for any of the panelists right here in the studio today. Now, Mr. Carl, you've listened from your co-panelists, and almost everyone is talking about the fact that we need to get back to fighting again for independence. I'll call it re-independence, because we had independence that was actually just signed on papers and stuff. Now, do you really agree that this is not only a problem of the leaders, because the leaders themselves seem to be tight, like they do not have any, they cannot do anything on their own. But then if their people come out and fight again, we could be liberated somehow.
Do you know why I'm laughing? The first fight we have as Africa, especially those in Central Africa, all these presidents, if you look at them, no one came to power democratically. Let us take the case of Cameroon, where after Aïdjo in 1958, as the premier finally became president, finally we had a successor. That successor is still there to today. Look at what happened in Cameroon when the Wuri bridge, the second bridge on the Wuri was attributed to China. France came in, and that country had to be withdrawn from China, bring back to France. France went again and brought back China. Look at what happened with Bolloré. What happened in Kribi with our deep sea seaport, Kribi deep seaport. Bolloré was out of this. Hollande visit to Cameroon changed everything. I am like telling you that before, if we want to fight, we first of all have to start with fighting our leaders. Let them leave that place, so that we should vote our leaders, those who can represent the people. Because the leaders we have in most of the France African country are leaders put in place by France. They are there because France asked them to be there. If we want to succeed this battle, the first we as the people here in Africa and all over, we first will have to fight out our leaders. They should first of all leave that position. Let's put somebody there that can talk for that can look at the general interest and not the private interest. Now, you like telling me that if they accept and all the like, yes, even if they accept that we and them we should fight. What will become of all what they've invested in France? Will you start by fighting somebody which all your investment is in this country? Look at what is happening with the man of Equatorial Guinea, the son of the president of Equatorial Guinea. What happened to his property in France? Will he stand out to fight? That is a problem. We first of all have to look for people who do not have properties in that country, banks account and all the like, maybe in the Western world, so that those who can see like Nana do, tell France that you are no longer a citizen. No, you are a colony. We want to be a country on our own and obtain our independence. That is what we have to do. I will still repeat, if you want to fight out France, the first thing we have to do is to first of all fight those they put in place to govern us, to rule us. That is the first thing. If we succeed in that, therefore we, the people, we can fight France. And if we want to fight France, the first thing we have to do, the first thing is that of currency. We first of all have to stop the use of the France CFA. Secondly, our material shouldn't go to France again. Maybe our resources. We should stop France from taking away our resources. Like Krati rightly said, how can you be living in a country and after 20 meters beneath the soil, it's not more your property, therefore you are living on air. Therefore you are living on air. So, Gina, we first of all, in order to fight these people, we have to first of all see on how to remove the leaders they put in place. Those who are having properties in their countries, let them go. That is how we can fight France. Thank you very much.
Thank you as well. Semutaga, many people have been talking about some new way of maybe Africa getting out from what they are going through. And the French President Emmanuel Macron, while he was in Africa, he spoke about a Marshall Plan for Africa. You know, the Marshall Plan was an American initiative to aid Western Europe. Now, we all have been talking about the fact that some French African countries are still not doing well even after more than half a century of independence, and we are looking at a way forward. Now, do you think Emmanuel Macron's Marshall Plan, or probably an initiative to help Africa out, is the best?
Gina, make also
Gina, that word Marshall Plan
Yeah,
has
that's
a
what
very...
he said. in
Yes, yes. If
Ouagadougou.
you want to go into a deeper look of it, it has a derogatory connotation, because if we are talking of France exploiting Africa, and he is the one that incarnates all the institutions of France and has a Marshall Plan for Africa, you know what it means. So he has a Marshall Plan to completely bury Africa. It's not a Marshall Plan to help Africa. So I want to come back to what my co-panelist Carl was just saying about fighting our leaders. I want to say these leaders in place, they are just our brothers, they are just our sisters, and we cannot fight them. What we need to do is to give them our support and to educate them, understand that the fact that they came into power through the French diplomat is not enough for them to think that like this. Their continuity, their existence depend on the French. They have the people who are their real people, their brothers and sisters here in Africa. I said one time, John the Baptist baptized Christ, but he was not greater than Christ. So a French diplomat or whatsoever they count themselves that help these guys to be presidents today is not enough for them to think that they have to hold the entire continent hostage. Our brothers who are in power, starting from Mr. Biya and other persons, have ruled the continent, the countries for so long, and they really know exactly the tricks of these guys, how they have been using those tricks to ruin us. So we need just to give them a lot of support. When I say supporting them, if we begin to fight them, I think it will have to crumble our different countries. It has to crumble our different things, because whatever it is, I want to say, when people fight, the casualties recorded are always very enormous. So what we need to do is just to prove to them that, like this, we believe in them. And, you know, we think that telling them that it's high time you cut links with the French, it's high time you do this, it's enough for them to begin to know that like this, those that they are working for are matured enough and can really encourage them to take good actions that will be beneficial for the country. So, Gina, France as a whole, that Marshall Plan that Emmanuel Macron said, I remember his very first outing here in Africa, he said, Africa is suffering today because of the fact that they have increased the size of the family. People are delivering right up to 10, 9, and all the like,
yeah.
which is not quite true. If you look at the population of China, China has emerged as a result of the fact that it has a large population. The United States of America is launching I want to say a green card, something like that, for people to fly into America because they see population as a valuable asset for development and growth. So Macron talked of a Marshall Plan. I said last time that to sign a pact with the devil, because you think that he lobbies that pact would be a very good one, it's really heading for doom yourself, or for doom. So if any African country thinks that it is for us to come out of misery, poverty, is signing a pact with is going to have French intelligence, I want to say it's a very big lie. So it's not true that France has any Marshall Plan for the salvation of Africa. It's not true that our dependence on France has always been as a result of the fact that we think that without France we cannot live. I want to be very precise about it. Is simply because, let me say this from a philosophical point of view, you know, when a lion is running from an enemy and looking behind, is not because it is afraid of the enemy, it is struggling to see how far the enemy can go. We Africans have seen the limit of France so much. We know that France has failed. France cannot help Africa. I think it is time now for us to turn and face that enemy itself, because we know its weaknesses. So if our leaders who have been following France so well and they're thinking that like this, France can do anything to Africa, find it really that they are not developing, their countries, continents are left behind, and they don't want to face France, I want to say it means they are enjoying exactly the injustice that France is doing to Africa. And then it's then that I will come back to buy what Maitre Carr said, that is like this. Such leaders who find that France is exploiting Africa and they don't want to ask their citizens, they don't want to support their citizens to fight France, then we should ask them out. And then tell them that no, we don't need you anymore because we see that you are there just to fight for your stomachs. We see that you are there just to fight for your families. We see that you are there just because you want the doom of the whole African continent. So that is exactly what I want to say. So if you look at exactly what is happening in Cameroon, I want to personally appreciate the Anglophone brothers and sisters for the struggle so far, because if you look at the Ministry of Decentralization has just been created, and I want to say it's a milestone in Cameroon's democracy, because since 1996 that the decentralization process came up in law, it has never been implemented. It's only after when untold damage has been done so far, many people have lost their life. I personally, I lost my brother, a lawyer. I lost about 3 or 4 members of my family. One is lying down in the hospital, whose legs have been cut, he's crippled. I want to say, but then I wouldn't say the country should not move forward. I want to say I want to appreciate the Anglophones, appreciate them for that struggle so far, because the struggle is bringing a tangible change in our country. And I want to say that is exactly what we mean, opposing a system that is working for the interests of France. And I want to encourage everyone, especially our Francophone brothers who have been brainwashed by the system in place, to think that the Anglophones, thinking that like this, you need to fight against France. We need to fight and say federalism should be in place, because the federal system will have to ensure accountability. With the federal system, you find that France will not have to exploit those nonsense. They need to renegotiate the terms of contracts and not like. France will not more say now with their own, how can I be living, like Kwati said, in my own country? France is the one owning 20 meters beneath the earth. What does that mean? It is utter nonsense.
Yeah. Sabutaga, thank you so much for raising that point. Actually, now we have Carson Chair. He's watching us, and this question is to you. He says the question is for Edmond Kiate.
Yes, sir.
He says, we know about our resources. We came to know about the resources, how rich the African continent is because of the West. Without them, we would not know what to do with these resources. That's all he says.
No, let not be fools. We can't say that without West, we cannot know what to do. And that is exactly the impression they want to give to us, that we are Mr. Nobody, that we know nothing. Do you know that during the days of slavery, it was conventional and it was official that black people have no soul at all. Therefore, they are not human beings and can be turned into black monkeys. And therefore, they can sell them just like they are selling every merchandise. Do you know that? And do you know that the justification of colonization is like what he said, mission de civilisation? That means these people, they are like animals. Yes. And they were as far as said, Africa is living because the white men touched them with the light. That is what they said. It means before the white men,
we're not living.
we were not living, and if at all we were living in darkness. So white men had to bring in a bit of light for us to be able to see and say, oh, Dina, how do you look like? Before that. And this is how they have been trying to brainwash our brothers and give us the impression that without white man, black man is nothing. Black man is animal, pure animal. How can you say that? How can somebody, I hope this man behind this message is not an African. I hope so. If it is a white man, I will take it as an insult, just like the way they have been insulting us. But if it is a black man, I will not accept it simply. No, it is not normal. This should not be a statement from, how do you call it? No, from an African. From an African. It should not be. It should not be. We are all human beings. We have the same, physical, everything. We have the same constitutions. So we cannot take ourselves so low to say if there is no white man who will not know the use of our own wells, of our own resources. It is not, it is not acceptable, and it is much more not acceptable from an African at all. We are saying that one, that if you know what cancer is represent in our body, then you will know what France represents in our countries. When cancer enters your body, if you do not succeed in taking this cancer out, this cancer will succeed in taking you out. Definitely.
Okay.
So, I am as an economist, we know that money, currency, is the fuel of economy. Currency, money is the fuel of economy. There is no economy without money, without currency. So how do you intend, my fellow brothers, how do you intend to develop an economy in a country when you are not the master of your money? When your purse is being kept somewhere else and someone decide how much he will give you every day? Okay. How is it possible? Can we really say it? So it's like you are having a very powerful and beautiful car, but each day somebody decide of the quantity of fuel that he will put into your engine. So if he gives you 2 liters, he knows that no matter how tough your car is, you have a particular distance. And that is what is been going on in our countries. France knows where we go, and they know where we cannot go. When we say we are relying on France to do what, we are talking of a master plan, of a Marshall Plan. Marshall Plan to do what? How can a cripple help an amputated man to walk, to move? France already is a crippled country. Without Africa, France will not longer exist. How a crippled country like France will help 14 countries to develop themselves? What is the meaning of that? Let not be fooled.
Yeah, thank you so much, Edmond Kiate. Now we're coming to the end. We'll probably end with you, Mr. Carl. Now, Roland Goa's question, we'll have to end with this. He says, we are who we are because of our leaders. What then can we do without them? Some of us feel, we cannot go out to fight against these leaders because some of them scare us. We cannot take to the streets, and we just have to rely on what has been set for us, the race that has been set for us. We cannot fight against us. Some of the I'm sure he's raising these because some of us did say that we should take to the streets, and even if our leaders are tight, even if it is France that chooses our leaders, we should come out and tell them we do not want France anymore. So he's saying we are who we are because of our leaders. We are limited. We cannot do anything. What can you tell Mr. Roland Goa?
Mr. Roland Goa, let me tell you, our leaders, we are not what we are because of our leaders. Our leaders, especially you, I want to tell you one thing, Gina. I want to tell Roland one thing. One of our leaders here in Central Africa said, "Je suis votre meilleur élève." Ne Dieu le pouvoir qui veut, mais Dieu le pouvoir qui peut. Therefore, he was like, he is the best student, the French best student. When you that he is having somebody behind, we are completely against him. Therefore, that leader does not make us to be what we are today. I am telling Gina, what we have to do first of all in order to solve this particular problem. We are suffering. I'm suffering. We are all suffering. Our children will suffer. Our generation will suffer. We should start telling those people today that please allow our countries. I want us to discuss on maybe any business deal. Let us sit down and discuss a business deal. That is what I have to say.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chabankal. Fellow viewers, we've come to the end of the Pan-African debate, and I'm going to leave you with this proverb from West Africa. The past does not disappear by command. Now, thank you all so much for watching. A big thanks as well to the panelists who made out time out of the busy schedule to be here with us. From wherever you're watching us, it's goodbye from Africa for now.